having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Welcome to the Locker Room to Boardroom podcast. My name is Ryan Blake. I'm the founder and director of Ryan Blake Performance Coaching, as well as the host of this show. The mission of this is to empower high-performing sports industry executives and directors to elevate their leadership through enhanced mindset, well-being, and lifestyle solutions, helping minimise stress and maximise fulfilment to reach peak performance by leveraging the insights, experiences, and strategies of real-world professionals. The vision of this is to become a go-to resource for sports industry leaders, providing actionable strategies to overcome challenges and solve problems without sacrificing personal priorities, aiming to cultivate a community of sports executives and directors who can effectively bridge the gap between sports and business leadership, ultimately living better to lead better. In this episode, I'm speaking with Ross Chisholm, the current head coach for Harlequins Women. We discuss what leadership means to him, the best example of leadership he's come across, what he considers the cost of bad leadership to be, what parts does he consider mindset, well-being and lifestyle to play in leadership and why, what's his key piece of advice to make someone a better leader in the sports industry, and much more. Right, let's get started. Ross, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. Please, can you start by telling everyone a little bit more about you, your background and your experience?
Yeah, so I'm Ross Chisholm. I currently am Harlequins women's head coach. I've been doing this now for close to a year. So I played professionally for Harlequins for 14 seasons. So I signed for Quins at 18. So I finished college, signed for Quins, played for Quins for 14 years. So I've been there for 16 years in the organisation. Did a year as sort of the Harlequins women's backs and attack coach, and then took over as head coach last season. And this is sort of going into my second season as head coach. That's me.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that introduction. I'm really excited to have you on. So, in your experience as a player and now as a coach, what does leadership mean to you?
It's a really good question. It's like leadership, I suppose, to me is almost like within the sporting context, is almost like the shaping of an organization, of sort of people, and how you I like to use the term like just help guide to where they want to get to. I sort of don't, my style is not to sort of like to try and drive the bus. I use like a bus analogy. Like I shouldn't be driving the bus. I think one, because I don't, the work capacity to drive the bus and do everything is too much. So actually just allow the right person to sort of take over driving the bus, and you just help almost navigate it to where it needs to go. And that's sort of what I sort of feel in my role at the moment is, how do I help people achieve their goals and their ambition, and then align a team to make sure that we're doing that, because everyone's goals are slightly different. And I suppose that's sort of what I saw done well in my playing career, was when we were, the squad was aligned and driven towards a certain goal by whoever was leading that group, whether it be captain or management team. It was really effective, and we were really successful in what we did, but we also had a really good time doing it. That was probably a big thing that I took away was, is creating that environment as a leader that isn't just, I heard someone say it the other day, like a high performance prison. We
Hmm.
live in this high performance world where we think everything is, high performance, high performance. And yeah, that's really important because it's why we're here. And you can't achieve success by not doing the kind of fundamental basics really, really well and working hard. But for me to be able to do that and get the most out of people, they have to enjoy themselves, and you have to enjoy it as well as a leader. Because if you don't, it is unsustainable.
Sure thing. Yeah, that's fascinating. Thanks for that awesome intro. And so you said you've been there 16 years, right?
Yeah.
Within the organization. So what would you say the best example is of leadership that you've come across as a player, and or maybe as a coach?
I think it's just that freedom to make mistakes and give people the
Mhm.
license to make decisions that's aligned to a common goal. That was probably the greatest thing. Like there's a real understanding of um sort of how you fit in the overarching program, as it
Yeah.
were. So, like a really nice saying at Quinn's is like the light is shining on you at this moment in time, and it's almost like what has been previously is really important to understand. That sense
Mm.
gives you a sense of belonging, and the club invested heavily in Owen Eastwood and how he developed that, and he worked with sort of Gareth Southgate's teams and numerous other sides. And pre that, we had a guy called Connor O'Shea that is now working at the RFU. And the biggest thing I took from it was just that what has been is really important, the kind of DNA, the sort of
Mm.
sense of belonging, and the pride that you have representing what has been, but also
Mm.
representing yourself and creating your own history, and the light kind of shining on you, as it were, and having that freedom to make decisions, to enjoy yourself, but also trying to achieve like, look, this is who we are, this is what we want to be, and we're going to make no secret about that. Let's go and make it happen in your unique way. And that sort of like bend and flex, I suppose, as the leader to be, tough when they need to be,
Mhm.
relax when they need to be, and just that real understanding of people
Yeah.
is what I believe is the kind of the real crux of how you get the best out of an environment. See a lot of coaches at the moment. I was in the same position myself where you sit on a laptop a lot and go, this is working. I'm working really hard, but you go, well, is it working smart? Is it actually giving you the biggest gain?
Mhm.
And sometimes you'd argue, no, it's not actually, because whether you do that little bit more analysis is, doesn't help people sometimes feel good. And actually, that kind of feel good around the environment you create, and that I saw that was created numerous times at Quinn's when we're successful, is important.
Yeah, sure thing. I think we can all close our eyes and think of a keyboard warrior or a laptop coach. I've
Mm.
been guilty of it in the past as well, especially when you're under pressure. It's an easy place to hide, but ultimately, being in front of the people you're trying to help is the the forefront of it, right? Just to flip everything on its head a bit, what do you think the cost of bad leadership can be?
I suppose in high performance, it's, results is obviously one. That's the real obvious, that you start losing, you're under pressure,
Hmm.
uh, the stress levels increase. And I think then you really started to notice people being unhappy. From my experience, you know, that sense of unhappiness and stress is sometimes like is then really magnified, and then it almost just comes to this bit of a rupture where it's like, oh God, this can't go anywhere. And I think that's sort of where it's at, and you sort of appreciate that in squads and team sports, you're not always going to be liked. I
Hmm.
think, because you can't, in a squad of 40 to 60. only 23 can be involved and only 15 can play. But it's almost like how that other part of the squad or the environment is, as I said, like enjoying themselves, or to a
Mhm.
point, you know, they're not unhappy when they come to work or to training, depending on what variety of leadership you're working in. And you're never going to keep everyone completely happy, but it's almost like they have a desire to want to be there. And as I said, look, I suppose in answer to the question, the long way around it, like the cost is unfortunately like unhappiness, stress, and people probably lose their jobs, unfortunately, in a results driven business.
Yeah, so I completely understand, and we've had a few other guests on from various other sports, and they've ultimately said the same thing. It results and ultimately money, and that's the black and white of it when things go wrong. But as you've just alluded to, you've got the people and the person as well, and how that it can affect their life. If the environment is not conducive to or being led well, it has so many ripples effects.
Oh, 100%. That's probably the biggest thing that I've seen in my playing and coaching is how do you have those really tough conversations that are
Yeah.
gonna upset people,
Hmm.
that no news is like, bad news is bad news. Do you know what I mean? Like we have
Yeah,
these
sure.
conversations, like, how do you sugarcoat that? Well, you can't, but there's a hopefully a way of, whether my players say that I do this or not, there's a way of like, you got to be honest and upfront and quite
Hmm.
direct, but empathetic at the same time. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes that's where people get themselves into trouble is you don't want to upset anyone, and actually keeping people happy sometimes is just being really honest so they know the full picture. And
Hmm.
like, although sometimes that's really hard and having to be quite direct, that for me is more powerful. And actually, once you have that initial sting, that person can then make a decision about how they want to move forward. Whereas actually, when it's you sort of don't really give the full picture to someone,
Hmm.
it makes it really challenging. And I felt that sometimes as a player is like, as soon as you get the full picture and the real reason why, like I now have a decision to make of how I move forward with this.
Yeah, sure.
And you can be happy, whereas it's that level of uncertainty that sort of like really, again, we go back to that stress and unhappy piece. Now, I'm not saying we use the term, you can't just bulldoze it all the time. There has to be a level of
Yeah,
empathy when you
yeah,
deliver
sure.
bad news. And my job is week to week, unfortunately, is delivering bad news to people that are not going to be selected. And I think that's generally what I think that I saw done well, and I also
Hmm.
saw done badly in my playing experience. Like, which, as you said, then it equates to leadership. And I think sometimes in leadership, you think I've got to be nice to everyone, or I've got to be nasty to everyone, or I've got to set this line. It's actually just open, honest, and aligned is probably the three ways that I probably try and tackle it, and I've probably seen it done well.
I love that. What part do you think like feedback and like just regular feedback plays in making that more digestible or easier for a player? What I mean by that, sorry to be clear, is like if you don't give feedback regularly versus then if you do you think that potentially could
Mm.
affect how that lands when you do have to give them bad news?
Yeah, I think look, giving and receiving feedback is really important in any world. I think it's one thing is not just giving feedback. It is one thing. Like what we try and do and what I try and do in our environment is I'll sit down with leadership groups and captains and staffing groups and say, right, give me your feedback about me or the environment, which sometimes even yourself, who's played for that amount of years and received a lot of generally quite negative feedback at times, whether it be coaching wise or social media, or someone just in the crowd telling you're not very good. I got a funny story about that when I first started at 18 and we played Newcastle away, and I'm stood behind the post and I was 18 years old, and someone's telling me I'm not very good, but in a less polite way,
Yeah.
and go, well, there's some feedback for you. And I suppose you just get used to it, but it's like that. Um, that's really important to me, is that someone once said to me, like, if you're going to give feedback, you got to be prepared to receive it as well. And I think in leadership, sometimes it's very easy to go, no, no, I don't need feedback. And actually, from
Hmm.
my point of view, is actually, no, we want feedback because feedback makes us better and actually makes people more comfortable to be like, I hear what you're saying. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can't always action that feedback.
Hmm.
But I think just having a voice both ways just opens up the receipt of feedback from both parties.
Hmm.
And you can have honest and robust conversations, which I think sometimes we shy away from in high
Yeah.
performance because
Yeah.
it's part of it, unfortunately, and then you just get used to, I suppose, that you try not to take it personally, even though
Hmm.
sometimes it might stick. Um, but if you believe it's coming from a good place,
Yeah, sure.
then I think um, that's probably where I'm at with it, and I think there's almost like a constant feedback loop, whether it's a
Hmm.
sit down conversation. Sometimes there's that sit down coffee conversation. We're like, well, here we go. This one's going to be quite punchy, but actually, can we just have a quick 1 minute chat, in the corridor that's just a constant conversation?
Yeah,
So it's not
sure.
always about sitting down and feedback. And clearly, when you do selection feedback or contracting feedback, that has to be done in a private
Yeah, sure.
setting. Um, but yeah, that's probably what I would say is like just that constant conversation. And again, it goes back to people, right? Is
Hmm.
like for me, leadership is just good people management, and it's something that I think is more talked about, like on these podcasts and things like that. But I think when you come up doing your like coaching badges and things like that, not that they're wrong, they're very much, it's coaching practice.
Hmm.
And a lot of actually the day-to-day job is probably 25% of my job. Actual coaching delivery, 75% of it is management of people.
Yeah.
Um, and you need all that coaching stuff, but it's almost like that's where I think we talk about it more, and people have. I think that's what gives you the edge in high performance environments, and generally from what you look into environments potentially is you
Hmm.
look at a Ferguson or someone like that, you go, wow, like is your own unique style, but leadership clearly was a really important thing in those environments. And actually, that is probably what makes the difference. Because we did in high performance, particularly in rugby, we're all doing the same stuff. We all
Hmm.
watch the same games, doing the same lineouts. We're all
Hmm.
doing like a variation. It's just how well can you do it? And
That's
generally, it's then for the point of difference is people.
that's absolute gold, Ross, and I completely agree. And we were talking earlier before we started recording about like how being comfortable in yourself and kind of being true to your purpose and true to your values, that makes this makes people management easier because it's coming from like a pure honest place. There's so many leaders that I'm sure we all know, we can think of, who aren't comfortable in their self, their identity's upside down, and they're just a very closed book when it comes to people management and doing all the things we just discussed.
I would agree, and it's almost like I suppose if I talk about my experience, and
Mm.
I suppose I had a really good career that I was really proud of, but I probably I didn't play for England. I was in and out of the side for 14 years, played a bit there, played a bit here, was understudy for a very long time, and
Mhm.
got 100 plus caps for the club. But actually, I was on the receiving end of a lot of these conversations and a lot of that environment. And I was probably more of a squad player, if I'm completely honest. And
Yeah.
actually, when you're going through that, you're probably not receptible to just be like, this is who I am and this is where I'm
Mhm.
at. And I think as I grew on that journey and just accepted it, not that you ever gave up fighting for a place, but almost that probably taught me that those skills, because I was on the receiving end, as I said, of a you're not going to play today, or your contract's this, or whatever. And I suppose you learn through your experience, don't you? And you
Sure.
uh, can relate, I suppose.
Yeah, no, completely. It's fascinating. I mean, we could do a whole episode on just this topic. There's just
Yeah.
so many moving parts to it. It's really multifaceted. So just to move on. So as we discussed earlier as well, like the three key kind of pillars or foundations that I use to help sports leaders, become more effective. So leading better to live better are mindset, well-being, and lifestyle. Because I consider those often to be the ones which are prioritized last and the ones which people often ignore. So with those three pillars in mind, like what part do you consider those to play in leadership, and why is that?
Yeah, I probably learned a pretty tough lesson when I first sort of, I suppose, retired from playing and in those
Hmm.
sorts of roles is actually, I think you've got to get that wrong, or you
Yeah,
get that wrong too, but you do because you sort of think, right, I've got to do this and do that. And I
mm,
think I got some really good advice from someone. Um, and my wife's a big supporter of this. It's like, you got to get that lifestyle and well-being bit right. Because actually, if you don't function well,
mhm,
the environment doesn't function well. There's no
mm,
point you being at 80% because you're burnt out yourself because everyone else is relying
mm,
on you to be at 100%. If you're not 100%, then it's almost like it doesn't function. Now, clearly, you're going to have some days where you're not firing on all cylinders, but that's where hopefully you work as a team to go, right. uh, Coming to my assistant coach, I'm like, "Oh, look, I'm pretty smoked today. I've had a pretty tough day of meetings or whatever, or kids were up late last night or something. Can you just, I'm feeling a bit not the right energy today. Can you deliver?" And just having a strong team around you and trusting them to go, look, you go and do it today, is probably quite important. And that was definitely some really good advice I got from a good operator, that just like, you've got to look after yourself. In
mm,
some ways you've got to be selfish
yeah,
to sort of be kind to other
yeah,
people. Because as I said, if you're had the kids up late or
mm,
whatever and you've had no, like, very little sleep, well, you're not going to do that tough conversation around contracts justice. And actually
yeah,
that's a really important conversation to have and get that right. Because
yeah,
actually for that player or that person environment, delivering that appropriately and properly is crucial.
yeah,
Um, Actually, those little things that add up, and if you're not right yourself or not in a good headspace yourself, then you're not going to do it justice, and you're not going to do that person justice as well. So,
mhm,
as you alluded to, it's really, for me, it's really important. And I still have days where you reflect and go, do you know what, I probably got my balance wrong today.
yeah,
Um, and that's probably something that I've seen done well and discussed with leaders in other environments done well, where they're just able to sort of buffer time. And I think when we're working right, you think more is better.
yeah,
And actually, you think you realize pretty quickly that smarter's better, and you don't need to be working
mm,
16 hours a day to sort of get that right. And actually, the more you're able to come off the gas, probably means you've got the environment right,
yeah,
or there or thereabouts, where actually it can function by itself. You've got some good operators that have enough autonomy to run
mhm,
their own areas and manage themselves. And I think that's probably what I see in our workforce sometimes, and
mm,
myself, is like, right, let's get on the laptop, let's work, 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 work. And it's actually, well, what is you at your best? Well, you at your best is rested, energized,
mm,
so particularly from a staffing point of view,
yeah,
because people probably don't hours that go in behind
yeah,
from whether you're an athletic performance, SSC, medic, all that stuff. You're not front and center. So sometimes it's like, that it's really important that you look after yourself, but then you look after them as well.
yeah, sure thing. It's ultimately it's not selfish, it's selfless. Like, and this is what I'm starting to hear more and more of. Like, if you can't, as you said, work to full capacity, then you can't expect your environment to work at full capacity. One of the other things which I've recently had a conversation with another coach in the world of tennis is he says he ultimately is trying to coach himself out of the job, that's his main role. And what he
Yeah.
meant by that is if he's there or not, it shouldn't make any difference. Because everything should be operating at the level it should be, and everyone should know what they should need to be doing and when and where. And he's just there as a conductor. He'd ultimately, obviously, you've got to be there more at the start to set all the foundations and get everything in the right place with all the right pieces. But the long-term goal is I shouldn't need to be here.
100%. 100%. It's
Yeah.
actually like this can function highly without it. Not one person defines the environment. You need
Mm,
a team working together collaboratively to make it function. And I think the real key to that, and I was very lucky that when we were playing, we got Gareth Southgate in and he did a talk to us, and something that really stuck with me. And you were like, what is the difference? What do you believe is the key difference? And he was like, it's alignment. It's alignment to a common vision and a common goal. And as
mm,
long as you have that function, and I would definitely echo that. Actually, you're right. Like if I wasn't here or you're just conducting it, but what it does need is it does need clear alignment and a clear purpose
mm,
to which aligns to the business owner, the club, what's been, what's coming,
mhm,
the fan base, what's the history,
mm,
and you pull that all together and go right. This, in your discussions, have conversations with players and staff, and what's your goal and what's your vision.
mm,
Pull it all together and go. Here is a one page of what we're gonna.
mm,
Everyone happy? Yeah, right. Let's go. And that for me is almost like once everyone's aligned and on the same page,
mhm,
it can function by itself. You're there day to
mm.
day nuancey stuff, but
Yeah.
generally, then it can.
Yeah.
You're there.
Love it. And it's the example, well, like I like to keep giving about high performance environments is it's almost like going to the Royal Albert Hall and watching an orchestra. Yeah, it's all of those moving pieces all can come ultimately from the music written down on the sheets, and the conductor is at the forefront, but then you've got everyone else involved for the performance to happen. It's incredible. But there's a lot of other probably better things you could relate it to, but I do like that concept of the classical music and the conductor. So Ross, last question before I let you go. Really appreciate your time. What would be your kind of key piece of takeaway advice for anyone who wants to become a better leader in the sports industry?
I think from my experience is just going and like reading about it and researching it. As I said,
Mm,
it's probably not something that there's no manual for it.
mm,
I would say coaching practice or delivery of on-field sessions and things like that is very like not linear, but it's like here's the manual. You're taught how to deliver it, and I think that's probably that I've sort of learned on this journey is almost like going away reading about. I probably spend most of my time researching more around leadership and delivery, and I we're very fortunate in our environment to have a sports psychologist, and just talking to them about how you deliver certain messages or how certain things work and the management of people and things like that is
mm,
almost where it sits, and I probably where I spent most of my time trying to develop individually, which is when I first started. If someone had said that to me, I'd be like, that's mental,
mm,
because I should be on a laptop learning about rugby and nuances of this and that.
mm,
And I suppose that is really important, and you need to know your stuff. But at the
mm,
same time, it's like, well, that is so nuancy, and actually, as when you're leading an environment, that is important to have an understanding and a grip of it. But that's not my number one priority. So
mm,
it's almost like working out, I suppose, what you want to be, what kind of leader do you want to be, and what sort of role you want to play. Are you a head coach? Are you an assistant? Do you want to lead the attack? Do you want to lead this? And then refining the skills that
mm.
um, you need or you want for that role is probably
Yeah.
what I would say. And And I said there's a big thing I've learned is probably around that alignment of vision and purpose and goal. And once you have that, it's a lot easier to lead from, because actually
Sure.
you can keep going back to it, or people can keep you accountable to it, or you keep people accountable to that. We agreed this was, but that would be my advice.
Amazing. Love it. Absolutely brilliant. So many golden nuggets there, and lots of brilliant stuff and advice for people to take away. So thank you so much for your time, Ross. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting and catching up. And I wish you and the team all the best for next season.
Awesome. Cheers, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. It would be really helpful if you please leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Is there someone you know who would benefit from hearing what you've just heard? Then help them out by sending a link. Be sure to check out the website www.ryanblakeperformancecoaching.com that has details about free tools which include the RBPC blog, more information about this podcast, taking the Performance Profile Online Assessment, joining the Sports Leadership Online Community, the Elite Impact Online Education course, the Elite Potential Online Coaching Program, the Elite Influence In-Person Consultancy, and how to get in touch if you have any questions. Follow on social media at LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, Facebook and YouTube. Links to these can be found at the bottom of all website pages and via any search engine. Until next time, take care.
Having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.